People think there's one reality, but there's loads of them all snaking off like roots, and what we do on one path affects what happens on other paths. Time is a construct. People think you can't go back and change things, but you can. That's what flashbacks are. They're invitations to go back and make different choices. When you make a decision, you think it's you doing it, but it's not. It's the spirit out there that's connected to our world that decides what we do, and we just have to go along for the ride. Mirrors let you move through time. The government monitors people. They pay people to pretend to be your relatives, and they put drugs in your food, and they film you. There's messages in every game, like Pac-Man. Do you know what PAC stands for? PAC. Program and Control. He's Program and Control Man. The whole thing's a metaphor. He thinks he's got free will, but really he's trapped in a maze, in a system. All he can do is consume. He's pursued by demons that are probably just in his own head. And even if he does manage to escape by slipping out one side of the maze, what happens? He comes right back in the other side. People think it's a happy game. It's not a happy game. It's a fucking nightmare world. And the worst thing is, it's real and we live in it. It's all code. If you listen closely, you can hear the numbers. There's a cosmic flowchart that dictates where you can and where you can't go. I've given you the knowledge. I've set you free. Do you understand?
Happy hair season. Welcome to the desert of the real. Welcome with kindness and love to AM by Gnostic Radio with your host Miguel Connor. We don't take prisoners but liberate them. We are not the final authority on anything, but hope to be an endless possibility for everything. Especially you finding the mystery that works for you and only you. We're running with those searching for the truth and avoiding those who have found it. We're the ones eternally walking away from Omelas because we've had it. And yes, we're writing our own gospels and living our own myths. What else would we do? Unless we always want to be in the wrong story at the wrong time. Trapped by soul-killing fate because of the ghost writing of hating angels. What do you think, Melisandre?
There's only one hell, Princess. The one we live in now.
Yes, what else would we do? And how do we write our own gospel? Well. In this episode, on this June, the year of our Demiurge 2019, we continue to find out, as our Astral Guest is actually a living case study. He wrote his own gospel like the ancient Gnostics. He literally took the Gnostic template and plunged into the labyrinths of his unconscious, and then tapped into the collective unconscious for primordial symbols, archetypal energies, and contraband mythologies. At the same time, opening his noetic channels to the revelations of higher daemonic forces. He found the story of Christ and Sophia that calibrated with internal magic that could break fate. Reveal his inner heavens and how to best express them to a dying world and a universe so desperate for some meaning from the darkness of mere being.
You see, I keep thinking that what we need is a new language. A language of the heart. Some kind of language between people that is a new kind of poetry. It's the poetry of the dancing bee that tells us where the honey is. And I think that in order to create that language, you're going to have to learn how you can go through a looking glass into another kind of perception where you have that sense of being united to all things, and suddenly you understand everything.
You'll get the blow-by-blow, the process itself, for you deserve apotheosis. And you'll also get many insights into that spiritual tech known as Gnosis. As Carl Jung said, but if you have nothing at all to create, then perhaps you create yourself.
If I'm not me, who the hell am I?
Our guest is Righ Denish, also known as Armunn Righ, in his popular YouTube channel that covers Gnostic and other underground themes from a mystico-philosophical perspective. Righ is a poet and artist, and a countryman. Again, he'll be talking on how he wrote his own gospel, entitled The Gospel of the Living. And you can find it right now at, yes, the God Above God.com, or in our show notes. Furthermore, we'll be talking Gnosticism in general, ancient and modern. So buckle your seatbelts of Satori and lock up your daughters of orthodoxy. The Black Iron Prison is about to get much less rusty.
Yes, these are bruises from fighting. Yes, I'm comfortable with that. I am enlightened.
As I've said before and mentioned in our interview with Righ, one of the central tenets of Gnosticism that highlights the importance of writing your own gospel is this quote from the Gospel of Thomas, saying number 70. It goes, Jesus said, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you." And there is one translation that actually says, when you have something left to share among you, what you possess will save you. But if you cannot share among you, that which you have not among you will kill you.
They need some kind of hero.
Then be a hero.
Oh, no. You don't understand. I'm not even supposed to be here.
That's right. You came a long way to find something that isn't out here. Don't you see? It's not about you. It's about them.
And it will kill you in so many ways. And it doesn't have to be this way. Don't let cosmic and earthly tyrants win. Please don't. There is so much beauty and potential inside of you. So much wonder you need to share with the world. And you never know. Like Dick or Ra or Shelley, your own gospel might bleed into your own material reality. For better or for worse, but always for liberation.
What unites people? Armies? Gold? Flags? Stories? There's nothing in the world more powerful than a good story. Nothing can stop it.
And let's face it, you can tell people to be nice, and no one will listen. You clothe being nice in myth, symbol, and allegory, and you'll transform the heart of others as you awaken your own fiery heart. It's just the way the human mind is wired. And I would follow Oscar Wilde's advice when he said, if you want to tell people the truth, you'd better make them laugh or they'll kill you. All of this is not easy, and I struggle, of course, writing my own gospel and living my own myth. But I think I have succeeded because I've been honored to be your humble servant in getting you those red pills, and sometimes red pill suppositories. But sometimes I fall into the story of Yaldabaoth and take myself too seriously and want a new smartphone and think a politician will save me. I resent the ones I love and want to go down on Maimon in a motel room of group thought. And then I hear your feedback and the laughter of my children. And I return to writing my own gospel, and here I am humbly serving you again.
If the world that we are forced to accept is false and nothing is true, then everything is possible.
On the way to discovering what we love, we will find everything we hate, everything that blocks our path to what we desire.
Bringing back Jung, he wrote, The point of life is that you're the fool for life, that you play the role, that you make all sorts of attempts, that you suffer. But you play that role in a most unsatisfactory way. You create a lot of nuisance or suffering or even catastrophes, and you identify with it. Therefore, you must divide yourself and think of the self. There is an Eastern saying, play the role of the king, the beggar, and the thief, not forgetting the gods. Even if you acknowledge that you are a thief, remember, that is a role you are playing. We are called upon to do strange things in this existence. Or even if you are a king, you must reserve a sphere of freedom, something beyond, where you are detached, where you disagree. You are as little king as the actor at Obermargau is Christ. The gods, of course, are appearances of the self, but in Eastern philosophy, Atman or Brahman is the self, the very breath of all the gods.
As Hemingway said, there is nothing noble in being superior to your fellow man. True nobility is being superior to your former self.
Let us end with a poem by Caitlin Johnstone, which relates to all of this. You have got to be out of your mind. You've got to be crazy enough to slap aside the hand that is offering you the Kool-Aid. You've got to be mad enough to call it a spade when everyone else is calling it a sunflower. You've got to be nutty enough to see a new world around the corner while everyone else says it's impossible. You've got to be off your rocker and skanking to 90s ska punk while everyone else is quite certain they're hearing a Calliope waltz. The earth is kept from spinning off its axis by unblinkered madmen, by lucid lunatics, by cleared-eyed crazies. The only thing keeping the world from plunging into total insanity are those few who are insane enough to doubt its sanity. Those few who cringe at the tinny bloviations of the official newsman and strain to hear the whispers underneath the cacophony. Those few who close their ears to the blaring screens and open their foreheads to the great big sky. Those few who are loony enough to see dust and ashes on the faces of billboards and paradise between the gaps in the noise. You've got to be absolutely moonstruck to keep yelling at the bastards when the world insists you pretend you don't see them. To keep forging toward the light when everyone is screaming that it is darkness. To keep building heaven on earth while the world hides your bricks and buries your tools. Thank you, berserk bulwarks. Thank you, savage saints, for daring to hallucinate when the world says regurgitate. For daring to howl when the world says march. For daring to dream when the world says die. You are the madmen who will lead us out of this madhouse. You are the homeless wanderers who will lead us home.
One of us is going over. Over there.
You die. You die.
It wouldn't matter, because there are other timelines, Stefan. How many times have you watched Pac-Man die? Doesn't bother him. He just tries again. One of us is jumping. So who's it going to be? It's a nice breeze up here. So come on. Which one of us is jumping?
This is the AM Bite interview, And with us, we have the pleasure of being joined by Rui Diniz to discuss his gospel, the gospel of the living, and other wonderful Gnostic sundries, including the process of writing your own gospel and living your own myth. Welcome here, Rui.
Hi, Miguel. It's a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us again. We've known each other from the Inner Sanctum of Gnosis group, exchange work and all that. So it's a pleasure having you, and always a pleasure. We've got the moon dog, Vance. How are you doing, Vance?
I'm not too bad, carrying a bit of a cold, but delighted to be here with you and Hui, our friend from the Inner Sanctum. So, very good.
Awesome. Yes, you're a case study on the failure of the body. This vehicle that is the body that fails us, always carrying all these viruses and germs, right?
Oh, yeah. It's a cosmic battle.
Well, I guess we should start with you, Hui. People at the Inner Sanctum of Gnosis know you. You have a YouTube channel, which I find very interesting, and you've got a good following there. But for those who haven't, who dare not, who have made the mistake of finding more about you, tell us a little bit about yourself, or maybe you could even start, what was your entryway, or how did you begin an interest in Gnosticism?
Well, Miguel, first of all, I would have to say that I consider Gnosticism or Gnostic not exactly like a sect or a religion or something like that. I consider it a language. And so this language was, I believe, later used by those who built Orthodox. You call it Orthodox. I prefer canonical Christianity. And they use that language to build the religion of Christianity. But it's a language that tries to put into symbols and words something that is ineffable, that lives beyond this dream world of, concepts and constructs. And so I would have to say, when I look back now, which I couldn't as easily until recent years, I see that there's really no one starting point, if you understand what I mean. It's like something that's been building up, and every little turn and event in one's life seems to be leading to another event that, gradually increases a certain bubble that then, when it comes to a certain threshold, just releases and gives you these instant realizations that then you have to translate and work with. And often, for me included, that means going through periods of depression or something like that. But that's something that we always need to put into perspective and to understand what really is going on at those moments. It's a death of a certain mental complex, right? The attachments of the ego. After the realization, we understand that we have to let go of things that no longer suits us, but the ego always wants to maintain them and always wants to stay with them. So I can't really say a specific point in time, but I would certainly tell you about my personal searching or my personal seeking. It went through, it started with Spiritism, the Allan Kardec kind of thing. I read one or two of his books when I was a teen, then moved on to Buddhism, in which I was very, very invested for several years, in the process of almost becoming a monk as well. And then it just, I just let go of these organized kind of things and just went what I considered the Gnostic path, which is an individual. It's not like a collective kind of sect thing that you have a discipline, that you have that sort of environment. but an individual path that you have to figure it out for yourself. You know, you pick up bits and pieces of this, of that, of the other, and you build your own thing. You know, something that works for you, something that you feel comfortable with. And when I say comfortable, it's not like you know, a comfort to maintain a status quo, but a comfort that makes you move forward. You know, because the ego also needs. Also has needs and also needs to be comforted. This is not, that's one of the problems with Buddhism that I found, was that they really wanted to, you know, shut down the ego. That is almost like the end goal of what Buddhism is nowadays. I don't know if it was like that in the old days. But that's too violent. That's simply too violent especially for Westerners, right? Us in the West, it's just too violent to kill off the ego. And there are other ways, and I don't think that killing the ego is the answer, in my view. So, well, I came to a point in recent years that was growing and growing, and I came to a point that I had to stop because I had these realizations, these I could call them messages, but it's not like, you know, there were no words involved. You understand? It's these understandings coming to me, and that I had to do something with them. I had to translate them into words, and I started by writing an epic poem in Portuguese. You've heard it. You've heard the recording of it.
Yeah, it's very good.
Thank you. But these the poem that I wrote was like I had to translate, and it was sometimes I use the word feverish, but that doesn't mean it was an illness. You know, it wasn't sick. I was happy to do it, but I had to finish it. I couldn't leave it. You know, it's not one of those things that you write a little bit now and then leave it for a month or a few weeks and then return to it. I couldn't do that. You know, I had to every day, every bit of time that I had to invest in that. And once that was over, once that was done, then I did a recording of it with a friend and my girlfriend. And after that, the gospel started coming to me. You know, it was like, also, in a way, because of you, that you keep saying, write your own gospel and all that. And I was like, okay, if I've got this message sort of coming to me, maybe Miguel is sort of synchronicity, as well, when he says that over and over again. And so I sat down and, okay, let's see what I have to write about this, you know? And it just flowed. It just flowed. You may not, I don't know if you understand or not. You're a writer too, but I don't know if this is your style of writing, but I just wrote. There was no planning. I only revised for mistakes and typos and that kind of thing. I counted on also Harold Hermit from the Inner Sanctum to do a revision.
Right.
Yeah. I just wrote from start to finish. I didn't know what was going to be written next. So it just, as it came, I was translating into words. And so after that, okay, this is done, this is finished. And I started to feel, because it was a sort of so evident thing that was coming to me, saying, listen, you're going to have to come out of the cave, because in a way I was purposefully, and I was enjoying going through this sort of hermitage period. Yes, I had to deal with people, but I wouldn't come to the fore. You understand what I mean? I would just be low profile, stay in the back, try not to, gather too much attention. But at this point, I just kept receiving these synchronicities, these sort of realizations, and I was always being told, listen, you've got to share this. What are you doing? You have to share this. And to share this, you have to, come forward, find some way to bring this to people. I mean, of course, it's not about you as a writer. It's not about you as a speaker or whatever. It's about what you try to convey in the same way that people like you, Miguel, and other people on the internet who, well, basically strangers we haven't met personally, you know what I mean, were useful to you. You have to be useful, therefore, to people who may be needing right now to read this or listen to this, And so I decided to create the YouTube channel in which I would record short videos, at most 15 minutes, because that's what YouTube allows me. And so try to condense little subjects that I don't know what I'm going to write next again. And usually I write a few hours before the recording. Sometimes I write in the evening and then record in the morning because I'm fresher. But I decided to do that as a way also to contribute, to bring to others, like I've said, that which was brought to me by strangers on the internet. And things, well, since I think it was March that it began, or February, I can't really recall. And with the interaction between also other YouTube channels, such as the Quantum of Conscience and the Start Where You Stand channel, things, attention grew a little bit. I'm one subscriber short of 666 subscribers, so I don't know if you're interested in being
the Satan, the Antichrist.
Yeah, so I don't know if you're interested in gathering that number.
I'm already subscribed, so no worries.
What about you, Vance? You want to be the 666?
Could do it right now.
I'm tempted, but I'll pass for now.
All right, and so it just started picking up a bit of pace. It's not 600 subscribers is nothing for YouTube, and if you compare it even with yours, but it was all organic. People just started paying attention to that, and they started, at least from the comments, I think that it's been useful to some of them, and I'm just really happy that it's like that it's useful. So Miguel, I think that would sum it up.
Great summation and a lot to unpack there. I want to get to some of your ideas about ego and ego death, which we can get down to. I guess my take is, I think, yes, there are times when I've written when it does come out from somewhere deep and it's automatic, but there are other times where I have to fight tooth and nail for this, and sometimes it's a hit or miss, but it's got to be done. I think the central point I've talked about, writing your own gospel, is it's what I talk about, that it's not Gnosis unless you share it or give it away, and that really comes from the Gospel of Thomas, where it says, if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. So I think that's the part that you were talking about, but also the part where at some point you have to not share it with the world, but you've got to have some skin in the game. You've got to draw the line to the God of this world, saying, this is what I'm about. Maybe you'll crush me, maybe not, but those that matter will hear, and all that. And you were talking about the words and all that, and I was thinking too today, it's interesting because if you tell people be nice to each other, or within you is the divine, nobody does anything. But if you couch it in metaphor and symbol and a story, which is really what we humans, that is really how we should think at our core, what separates us from other beings, then they'll get it. And I think that's part of it, isn't it?
It is, although that could also, I mean, the the demiurgic religions do that too. They do that with a different intention, perhaps, of course, but they do that too. I would go to a place beyond actual words, and I think that if it's a truthful teacher or a truthful teaching, it will always tell you to go to yourself and to a place beyond yourself. And I think that is the main message of all this. And we can talk for hours, but it's always about people doing their own alchemy, their own inner process of going through the words, going through the concepts, going through the bits and pieces of reality, which is false if they can understand it. That is the first step, to understand that reality is false. And then after that, once that is understood, go and see between the lines of your own story, between the lines of your own little concepts and constructs, and see what is there. And when you start paying attention to things that are not actual concepts, you can look at a tree and say to yourself it's a tree, but you can also look at a tree and stop saying that it's a tree. Just let it be that image, right? And after that, when that stillness beyond the concept comes, then you can start seeing what is beyond the tree, the life that lives in the tree, all these creatures that depend on the tree and all that. So I would go a bit further and beyond the words and the messages of these moralist, let's say, concepts, because morality can also be part of the whole fakery, of the whole falsehood, I would say.
Well said, indeed. Yeah, it's like William Blake said, you can start seeing heaven in a wildflower and infinity in a grain of sand. Because even as Eric Wilson said, abstract thinking is demiurgic. We get stuck in that abstract, but to be really embedded into that object, into the life itself, into the divinity that's in everything. As you said, it takes going even beyond that. And I also like what you said about how Gnosticism is a language, and it's an interesting synchronicity, because I was watching a lecture on YouTube today by a Toronto professor, John Vervaeke, and I think it's series Awakening from the Meaning of Crisis. And he talks about the Gnostics, and he says, well, the Gnostics were not a religion. They were a language. They were an existential feeling that was trying to break through the world and the times they were in, and they just happened to adopt Christianity for a while. So that's very interesting. And what do you think about this, Vance, the whole idea of Gnosticism being a language, or do you have a question or comment for Rui?
Oh, I like that a lot. It's definitely, in my mind, not a religion, but it's kind of a scheme of thinking. Thought is based on some kind of language, almost always, right? Unless you just count images, and even then, images can be language. So I think it's a good way of thinking about it. And I'm lost for words. How's that for synchronicity?
There you go. Maybe you're going to the right place, Vance. You're reaching beyond the world of abstract thinking and forms.
Well, I was thinking about this new tree we planted. When you guys are talking about trees, and it's funny. I ignore all the stuff in the garden and talk about seeing things as being different. I think this is a good example. We went to one nursery and we saw a bunch of sticks. It was a birch tree we were trying to replace. They just didn't feel right to me. Then we went to another place in another town, and I came up on this one, a birch tree, and it just glowed at me. I said, wow, I felt kind of this thing was alive, and I felt an affinity to it. I said, this is it. This is a great tree. I love this tree. So we brought it home, and it got planted. And so I've been looking at it every day. I come home and I look at the tree, and I say, I think you're doing a little bit. You're having a little shock from being planted, because I noticed the leaves were a little droopy at the top and so forth. And like I said, I ignore the garden stuff normally, but I connected to this tree. I used to call myself a druid when I was in college. So I guess maybe there's some of that sitting around in there. But the point is that I looked at it more than just some trunk with a bunch of branches and leaves on. I looked at it, I saw the life in it. So, and that's a language, it's kind of an internal language. So that's my comment.
So, Julia, again, we want to get to some of your concepts that we've been talking about because, again, there are ideas like ego and freedom and reality and all that, and we throw it around on the internet all the time, and sometimes we forget to define these things or find a new context. We want to get to that, but we want to first maybe unpack your gospel. And you said that this just came to you. I read it. I enjoyed it a lot. I got some new insights, as I told you. I saw new different angles to the whole Gnostic creation. But it does follow, you might say, to an extent, the Sethian formula, creation, the fall, and all that. Is this something you wanted or structured, or what was the process of this coming out by stages?
It's just as it came. Of course, I've read the literature, the Gnostic literature. So, of course, the concepts and the words and the symbols were there. Perhaps if I was based on a different language there, a different symbolic language or mythical language, it would come out differently. That's why we would put this into the category of Gnostic gospel, because it uses that language. But it is as it came. And what was so magical to me about that was that my work was the translation into words. I really have trouble explaining, because usually we have this, you have to experience this to understand truly, but usually we have this idea that, when you're a writer, you really think hard about what the words to use and all this and all that. But it really, my problem, my work was to put it into words. Which words can I use? And I used a lot of thesaurus and that sort of thing to try to find words, because I think that I considered that the message needed a good treatment. It needed to be aesthetic as well, right? And afterwards, you've told me that the Gospels, at least the Gnostics ones, were supposed to have been performed, right? And that's interesting, because what would happen would be that after I finished a part a little bit, poor Anna, poor my girlfriend, she would have to endure me reading to her, and it was like, okay, what do you think? And she was just, what do you want me to say? So, but yeah, it just structured that way naturally. It just came. I didn't know I was going for, I can give you an example. When I started, I thought it was just going to be a little piece about the emerging of the Demiurge from Sophia, which are symbols. This is not to be taken literally. I keep saying this because I think there are a lot of people who take these things too literally, whether it's, Sophia or Sophia, Demiurge, even the archons and all that. It's not a literal thing. These are symbols to represent something that we really can't define, right? And so it's like a mathematical formula, but the mathematic is a language for the concrete, while a myth is a language for the ineffable, right? To transmit something that you really can't define in any other way. It uses words, but it's not defined by words. And so it just came this way naturally, and I thought it would just be about the emerging of the Demiurge. And all of a sudden, I find myself talking about the promised, because I don't like the name Jesus. That's why I never used it in the gospel. And I didn't know it was going to end up there. I didn't know I was going to write about that. I didn't know that there was this different way of looking at what is called the passion story, although it's not really as defined as that. And it just came naturally. I really can't say that it was anything planned. My work was to translate as it came, and it was again, I'll use the word feverishly done, but not in a sick way. It was a joy. It was a really, I felt in service.
Like almost ecstasy. It was an ecstasy.
Yes, you could put it like that. It was really joy, really ecstasy. Let's say, yeah. To be of service, to be also an honor to be of service. You understand what I mean? Like to be the one to be the one to put this into words. And I am very grateful. But it was really a feeling of joy, despite the hard work. And it was hard work to trying to find the right words and put it together in a, at least I hope, understandable manner, and to translate into the best words I could find. So it just came naturally, Miguel.
Well, wonderful. And yes, I think we know how the ancient poets and bards must have felt. I always say poets are these shamans. They travel into the collective unconscious, to the world of symbols and myths to bring back those treasures that, as you say, those ineffable messages to the tribe, to help the tribe understand itself and find a sense of meaning. Because out there in the universe, there really is no meaning. The meaning is inside of us, but it's just true. It is true meaning. It is true spirituality. It is real. And what I thought was very interesting, and of course for the audience, the Gospel of the Living is available at our site. If you didn't get an email or anything on social media, you can pause this and go read it or read it afterwards. It's at the godabovegod.com. So you can find it there and read it. But going back to what I was saying, what I found fascinating is we had Shadi Gaith, who's a Druze, and he talks about the Druze creation myth. And it is very parallel to yours. And I know you haven't listened to the show or were unaware of the Druze and their mythology. But in the Druze mythology, Sophia, what does she call the world soul? She starts out as this beautiful woman trapped in a room or inside a room, and she wants to go explore. She wants to go see the world or see what's out there in the chaos, if you would. And as soon as she's created or she does it, her shadow comes out, which the Druze call the Satan or the Demiurge. And your story, well, tell the audience, it's very similar to this.
Yes, when you've told me of that relation, and I really didn't had the time to listen to that show, and I decided not to before the interview, so as not to taint my opinion with that, so that it could be as pure as possible. Yes, I see the similarity with what you're saying in the gospel of the living. What happened was that Sophia already had a sort of repressed toxicity before the fall. I don't know if it's evident or not for the reader. I don't know if you got that idea, but she already had some repressions beforehand. And what happened after when she took the step is that she felt that she could do better than what was put in her path for her, because things were defined. She had a groom. She had things planned out for her. But she thought she could do better. And this is something that we can evidently see and relate in our, reality. We can We can see this and in play in a lot of people. And what happened was that after she took the step of going to look for a better groom, because she thought that she can find a better entity to marry with than the one her father chose. And she went inside herself to look for this. And the one that caught her attention was the shadow, was this repression that had been building up without her knowing. So it was sort of in her subconscious, but that looked very, very appealing to her. It was a fascination. It was also a sort of libidinous thing, right? That emerged from within her. And as she looked at her at the shadow that was there, that was made up of these repressions, she fell in love. But it wasn't a love of the purest kind, of course. It was a sort of passion that would make her leave everything irrationally. And so, yes, when she embraced that shadow, she immediately created the world. She immediately created creation, let's say, which is something that I think it's also evident, because that was part of the message. It's something that all true entities do. They all create worlds. They all dream worlds, but they only dream worlds when they're already matured. And you have to be matured, you have to dream a world together with your counterpart. So it would be husband and wife, if you like, and they together dream a proper world where they can experience things in that otherwise they can't in the ineffable world. I don't know if you understand what I mean, but in her case, she dreamt it alone. And she dreamt it with her shadow. And the shadow is nothing more than her repressions. And so he started throwing back at her, sort of mirroring back at her, all of this that she had put into the subconscious in a very Jungian way. And as that developed, it grew and grew. And she found herself all of a sudden, after the glitter of the fantasy and of the trances had died out, she found herself trapped and cast down and banished in her own dream world by a construct that is not even living, which is the Demiurge. And so the shadow split into two, and you would have the shadow of the construct, which is in the Gnostic language, the Demiurge, but also the shadow of her organic living being, which is the serpent. And so the same entity that created, which was her, became shadow, divided into two, and created a world of conflict, of eternal conflict between this construct, Yaldabaoth, and the serpent Gaia of matter. And I, at a certain point, I think I used the imagery of the Ophiuchus, which is, as you know, a constellation that represents the struggle of, was it Adonais? I'm not certain right now, with the Python, in an embrace, right? The serpent bearer, the god that has to wrestle with the serpent and is bit by the serpent, and they both sort of try to kill each other off, but never really can.
Right, like Yahweh and Leviathan in the Bible, in the Old Testament,
right,
and so forth. Marduk and Tiamat.
Yes.
Tiamat.
Yes, and this is also in Greek mythology. I'm not sure if it was Adonis that there was
maybe Apollo, I believe.
Apollo, yes, of course, yes, Apollo and the Python at Delphi. So you see this recurring myth as well, and I think that is the struggle of the two shadows, good and evil, which are two shadows in this place, and it's very easy to fall into the ruse and the temptation, in my opinion, of being stuck in this duality that is a false duality. These two shadows work in the same system, and they are not from the truth. And so you can join the forces of Yahweh, Yaldabaoth, the God. Oh, you're on the right side. You're on the righteous side. Or you can join the forces of, Gaia, the serpent, Satan, whatever, and you're on the evil side. But you're both the same, You're going to just maintain the conflict, maintain the structure of time and history and all that. When the purpose is to understand that if you realize that the world between this good and evil, these two shadows, is false, then the true good, the truth is the good, and it's outside of this. It comes from outside. And this is a problem because then you would have to admit that you're stuck in hell or in a hell, right?
Yes.
And people don't want to. People want to, have hopes that this will become better, that the world will, if we work well enough, or if we just got together, or, this sort of thing. The problem is the people that think like this, or the problem is the people that think like that. And if we could, just figure them out, find a solution for them, find a solution for all this, then things will be great. It isn't like that. But it's a tempting thing, right? Because our mental complex, which in my view, and it's something that I really didn't define as well as I should in the videos, the mental complex is the ego plus the archons. That is the ego plus the attachments, right? Of various degrees. And when these mental complexes always want survival. The archons don't want to let go of their own way, their only way of life, right? If you find an antidote for a parasite, the parasite his way of life will be extinguished, right? Exactly. So it doesn't want you to find the antidote. It wants you to think you have the antidote, to think that you're being healthy right now, when in fact you're being just maintained so that they can continue existing. And that is the only purpose. I mean, there is no other purpose for the archons. They're sort of automatons, in my view, and not just mine. Their only purpose is to just continue existing. There's nothing else there. But there are, in my view, people or individuals who figure it out, and who willingly decided that this world was better for them because they could be kings here or emperors here or have power here, when out there they would just be a normal servant. And the problem is that these individuals never realized and probably never experienced what true service is, the bliss of true service. When you're in service, it's beyond any kind of throne, any kind of any kind of power, any kind of construct like that of service is opposed to slavery. If you have service, you can't have slavery. If you have true service, which begins, you can even have a hierarchy to work with because it's functional, right? People have to have their assigned jobs for things to work out. But if everyone from the boss to all the other workers, if all of them are in true service, then it is bliss for all of them. Because people, what I say is that in truth, you do, and do here is, well, it's a concept that it's a word that we need to use because we're in time. We're in the realm of time. But let's see if I can explain. If you do what you are, your job is what you are. You understand what I mean? So if you're a gardener, you are the garden in a way. You understand? You are part of that whole thing that you do, and function that you perform. And this is bliss. Finding the place where you fit immediately, and that is not here. And I'm not saying that people can have a reasonable amount of happiness, of ego happiness here. I'm not saying that. That is doable and achievable, and it's healthy. I'm not saying that is bad, but what we need to realize is that even when we're happy, we need to realize that is not the truth. That is not the end. You understand? Because eventually time will catch up with you. And okay, you're happy now, but 10 years from now, your body fails and you die. And things end. Or there's a tornado or whatever, and your house goes down and all that. So that is the dual. When we're stuck in this kind of hell, there's a dual function for time. Time has a curse because it doesn't allow the good between commas here, doesn't allow the so-called good to be sustained, to be eternal, because it always dies. And it's also a blessing because it doesn't allow the evil to endure forever. So since anything or nothing lasts here, all things that are created will be destroyed. Only the uncreated is eternal and doesn't get destroyed. There's no reason, no purpose to think that the end goal in here is to be happy. And well, I think I've gone off on a tangent there. Sorry.
No, it makes sense. It reminds me of when I asked this Buddhist priest, or he related, he said, enlightenment is not some mystical happy experience. It's being the most useful you can be in this universe. Like you talk about the gardener gardening. He is in the moment. He is embedded in the place. Yes. And that makes perfect sense. But what would you say is eternal? What's the purpose then?
Well, the purpose is just, I think that we're all, we have a connection. Those of us who do have, I think some do not willingly, some willingly do not, and some unwillingly. But we have a connection to an individual truth ray, let's call it like that, sort of an emanation from this source. And this source, which you could call it the fallen goddess, so the Sophia, also called a shard of the goddess, right? In some other imagery, we have a connection to an individual ray, and the purpose is to go back to the source, go back to that truth that is beyond this world of constructs. And I think that the only thing that is needed, it's not like a work, or it can involve work because the ego needs that. The ego needs to identify a gradual evolution of things. But that is only done because of that, because of the ego needs of identification. Because in truth, it only requires realization. And it's instant. It takes no time. You can have a person's outlook on existence change in an instant if the person or the individual accepts what is evident in that realization and doesn't try to mask it with other things. And that's part of the alchemical process. So I would say that the purpose is really to just realize, and when realization comes, the connection to truth emerges, because realization can only come when you get undressed, let's say, from all the constructs of the world of falsehood. So you would have to clear up space. Let's put it like that. Clear up space first, and as you clear up space, something else starts to take its place, starts to emerge and take the place of those things that you vacated, and magic starts to happen. Well, magic, probably not the appropriate word, but miracle starts to happen, and realization starts to happen. And the purpose is really just to realize and go back. I won't tell you here that I know exactly what's on the other side. I mean, we can't put it into words. But also, do we really need to know? We can only know what truth is not from where we stand. And if truth is the opposite of this world, then I'm sure we'll be okay.
Yes, indeed. So you would define truth as what is eternal, and falsehood as what is temporal.
Yes, I would say timeless instead of eternal, but I understand what you mean. Yeah, because eternal implies time, but timeless, something from beyond timelessness. I would say that this. Do you prefer books or movies, Miguel?
I would say books.
Books. Okay, so imagine that this world is a book. Okay, and when the book is in your shelf and you're not reading it, it already contains everything that happened in the story, right? It contains all the characters, it contains all the actions, all the events, all the scenes, etc. When you pick up the book and start reading it, then it has time, right? Time begins then because you're reading it. You're applying your attention to it, and so you're developing the time of the story as you read, right? So imagine that we're all, and this is a metaphor, of course, imagine that we're all reading the same book at the same time, and we're just reading our little parts in them, right? You're reading the part Miguel Connor, I'm reading the part Rui, and Vance is reading the part Moondog, and so on. And we're all reading these parts together, and as we do, we generate time, because it's when the book is being read that time exists. And when the book finishes, when the story finishes and restarts, so you go back to page 1, during those times that the book is not being read and it's put outside and it's put on the shelf, then there is no time. You understand? But all things that happened in that story are already contained in it. Do you think you understand?
No, it makes sense. But it almost seems a necessary thing that we have to read the story, right? To get to the end, to understand.
Yes, but it depends on if you read. Then we go into the scripts. There's one of the videos I speak about the scripts and purpose. There's a lower script which is also defined by astrology and all that, which is the purpose is to keep the story going. You know, the story needs to keep going and not be severed. But then there's the higher script, and the higher script are these realizations that try to take you away from the book. You understand? So yes, you have. It's also like in the freedom article that I wrote for your blog,
right?
Where I say something to the effect of you cannot find or you cannot realize without seeking, but then you have to understand when to stop seeking so that truth finds you, right? So you have to read, yes, you have to search, you have to play according to the rules, let's say, but then also understand and realize when to stop and when to let go of the story and when to just allow yourself to be carried away out of that script, out of that lower narrative, if you prefer. So I would say it is a necessity to start reading, because without reading, your ego and your mental complex has no tools to have a foundation, to lay their feet on. But you also have to realize when to stop, when to get away from the story, get away from the book, and therefore get away from time, and things instantly are realized, in my opinion.
No, makes sense. And going back to your gospel, and again, these ideas are in your gospel, they're in your YouTube channel. But and your gospel has the breakdown of the creation, the fall, Adam and Eve. I guess now we know who the serpent is in your gospel. It's not Jesus like the Manichaeans, and then it comes to the story of Jesus. But one thing that's very interesting, and we've discussed this on social media and other places, is I know today people often, modern pagans, modern Gnostics, want to worship at the altar of Sophia, even though we both know that wisdom is dangerous. Wisdom comes at a heavy price always. And as I forgot which gospel, our sister Sophia, he who is a whore, she is dangerous. But as you say, Sophia still, I don't know how to put it, she's still addicted to this world. She still is causing more trouble. It's almost like she is the Demiurge in many ways.
She is. I mean, the Demiurge emerged from her repressions, right? At least in my view, or the view that came to me, the Demiurge is a product of her repressions. It was her, let's put it, transgression that created the whole thing. But since, and picking up the metaphor of the book again, she, while in the story, it may, we experience the equivalent to Sophia as still being addicted, as still being fallen and all that. But outside of the book, it's already happened that she was redeemed. You understand? So while we're reading the book, we don't know the ending yet, or at least we don't remember the ending. But the ending was already played out, because it's a story that's been played, or that's been read in the book metaphor. So she is in her fallen state. She was first enamored and completely entranced by this shadow, and this is a very prominent myth of the woman enamored by the monster. You know, the Beauty and the Beast, and so on. And she is enamored by this Phantom of the Opera, if you like, and after she realizes that he is a monster, that he has wrathfully banished her from her own dream, because she gave him the power to do that. I mean, so she basically banished herself, right? Through her shadow, through another sort of schizoid character in her mind. Then she becomes addicted to try to deviate the beings from worshiping this shadow entity, and so she becomes the second side of the coin, right? Which would be that Satan entity, or in as you said, the pagan Gaia, and so on. And these this stage, I think, will end with, and it can only end with, eventually the embrace between the two shadows. Of course, this is symbolical, it's mythical, it's not literal. And I have to say this a lot of times because a lot of people take these things literally. And they have to embrace, like the Ophiuchus, like the serpent bearer, like Apollo and the python. Apollo has to strangle the serpent, and the serpent has to bite Apollo, like the serpent of Ragnarok bites Thor, and kills Thor. It's the same theme with different symbols and languages, that happens at the so-called end of the world, which is nothing. It's a symbolical thing for the revelation. But the revelation of what? Well, the revelation that the world is not exactly what your ego complex or the mental complex treats it to be, that it is a false thing, that you're actually dead, that when people ask, well, is there life after death? Well, this is it, you know? This is the death. You're dead right now, and what you want is to go to life, not have more death, not have reincarnation in another death, but go back to life, where life and truth are simply timeless. They never change. And some people would say, well, that's boring. Well, then it's not for you. Keep going. That's fine. Because there's this excitement addiction that's in Sophia and through this symbol of Sophia in our psyches. Of course, this is all symbols for our psyches. That is addicted to this excitement, that wants, things new and things to do and things to beat and challenges and all that, right? They want, the world is a casino that wants us to keep playing. And it even gives us chips, as I say in one of the videos. It gives us chips to keep going if necessary, right? When you're just about to give up, there's always that temptation coming, right? The free chips for you to keep playing. No, you don't need to give up right now. Here's a little, a little nudge to put a few more coins in the machine, or just play another round in the roulette or whatever. And so, yes, she as an energy inside us is enamored, but will eventually have to come to terms and will eventually have to face the repression that made the shadow, and through the truth that comes from the outside. And this is who I think the groom is symbolic of, the truth that comes from outside and saves her, like the knight that saves the damsel from the dragon or the beast or the monster or whatever, in the many popular myths of knighthood and all that. The pure knight that comes to save the damsel. After that happens, then she is redeemed. Then she is saved from this madness, because it's just that. It's madness. It's repressed madness. It's schizophrenia, and is made whole again. And we are parts of that whole. We are not all the same. We are parts of it in the truth, in our true essences, right? When we peel off all the layers of the false onion, we would not find, because it's not exactly like that, but it would be there the true essence, the true connection, so to speak. So yes, that is my view, Miguel.
Oh, well, you're preaching to the choir. I keep telling people, don't sit there and worship Sophia. She's not going to save you. We have to save her, and I agree, she's schizophrenic. How do I know this? Because I'm schizophrenic. We all are living false, multiple personalities trapped here, like you say, in between the serpent, Gaia, and the Demiurge, the constructs of the world. So, well, I think we are at the end of the interview. Vance, thanks for being here and keeping us company in this car.
Oh, it's been fascinating. And, Hui, glad to actually talk to you in person. And congratulations on your gospel. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. And Hui, I will have this on the show notes along with the Gospel of the Living. But for the audience, somebody who might be driving around or jogging while listening to podcasts, what's the address of your YouTube channel?
Ooh, the address is complicated, but
or what do they search for?
Yeah, just
if
search.
Not, I'll be on the show notes.
Yeah, just search for Armunn Righ. That's ARMUNN for November, space RIGH.
Wonderful. Well, you heard it here, and check it out. And again, please read the Gospel of the Living. So, well, thank you very much, Hui, for coming on, for your time, and giving us a very stimulating conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel, for allowing me to bring this forth, the message that I received, and hopefully it will be useful to strangers as strangers were useful to me. And thank you, Miguel, also for the part you played in all this.
And there you have it, my beloved Truth Seekers. The first half of our interview with Rui Denis, based on his work, The Gospel of the Living, and his journey into writing his own gospel. A little closer to writing your own, I hope. In our second part, we continue to delve into the Gospel of the Living, including his fascinating take on the crucifixion of Jesus. This leads us to finding insights on how to save Sophia in both the imaginal world and in our real world. Rui shares his ideas on what exactly is evil and why maturity is so important to break away from the many false realities around us. What is fear and how can we overcome fear through the alchemical process? What is the ego and how can we make it work for us instead of trying to jihad its ass? Rui also gives us his take on the rape of Eve and other prevalent Gnostic tropes found in the Nag Hammadi library. And much, much more, including Rui granting some overlooked Gnostic movies you will really enjoy. So please become a member or patron at Patreon for the full dope and to help keep this Red Pill Cafeteria open. A mere $5.99 a lunar cycle. This includes full access to the archives with more than 430 episodes with the best and brightest in Gnosticism, Western esoteric and free thought, and full episodes of my vlog, The Abraxas Brief. You'll also get an invitation to the Inner Sanctum of Gnosis Facebook group, where I stream The Abraxas Brief live and answer your questions. And we have some truly intriguing conversations from an amazing community. And I'm always there to address your issues and get the latest on Gnostic news around the universe. And you'll also get invited to our new Discord channel. Even support in the form of some shekels to PayPal or the US mail really helps. I can't do it without you. But what you can do is write your own gospel and live your own myth, so you can finally stop being a slave. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being yourself, your true self. That is the most amazing storyteller. Hello and goodbye as always.